strange to me because, as I said before, I had no background in Vedic culture at all. You know, most of you have some background. You can say, well, I believe in what I believe in because my parents told me. They told me I have to believe like that. They forced me, you know, many of you, I'm sure, have been forced to go to Hindu temples and stuff like that, and you find it quite boring. You gotta be honest. Yes, and that's really boring. So, because in many of the temples, they're not presenting the actual Vedic conclusion or the spiritual science of the self. So basically, after this journey and after this realization, I came in touch with my spiritual teacher, Srila Prabhupada. It's called Spiritual Master, Guru, and I accepted him as a teacher, and throughout these years, and that was in 1971, I've been realizing more and more about the spiritual realm by direct experience. In Bhagavad Gita, there's one statement in the 9th chapter that talks about this verse, pratyaksha, which means direct experience. You have a direct spiritual experience. So my faith or belief is based on direct experience. It's not based upon indoctrination. So I know it's a challenge for all of you, or many of you, because, you know, you were basically indoctrinated by your family, in my case you wasn't. I was part of indoctrinated.
What does indoctrinated mean?
Indoctrinated?
Yeah.
That means, let's see, put it in simple English. It means basically berating, you know, and drilling into someone's brain something. Without, you know, a poor child is not aware, doesn't have a sense of judgment. So you just tell people a certain doctrine.
Yeah.
Doctrine, you know, so a certain philosophy, a certain belief structure, and you just like, this is your belief, Krishna is God, Hanuman is there, you gotta believe in it, and then they force you to go to the religious side. I mean, that's indoctrination. I mean, so many politicians indoctrinate people, like the communist philosophy people were indoctrinated when I was young into the communist philosophy, not in America, but in Russia. So, but, you know, people are forced to believe what their parents believe in. I mean, my parents also tried to indoctrinate me in a different spiritual path, but I was open-minded enough to see that spiritual path was not holistic. I'm not saying it was wrong, it was just partial understanding of the truth. I wanted a full understanding because of my scientific background. I didn't want general answers to what's life all about or where you go at the time of death. Because as a scientist in the past, I wanted really definitive, definite, specific answers to all those questions. And everyone I went to, outside of my spiritual teacher, Sri Prabhupada, would give me vague answers. They would say, it's a great mystery, nobody knows. Don't ask those questions, it's impertinent to ask those questions. I get all those answers. So, anyway, so my doing what I'm doing is based on my own experience and realization, not on blind following. So I think it's important to explain that's why I believe in Hanuman. That's why I believe in Lord Ram. That's why I believe in Krishna. That's why I believe in reincarnation. That's why I believe in karma. All these different concepts. Because of my own personal experience. Oh, Hare Krishna. All right, so that was the introduction. And does anyone have any questions about that before I begin to speak about Hanuman directly? Yeah.
Talking about your experiences, so I have asked you about those experiences as well.
Just like when you eat something and you're told that particular sweet is sweet, okay, sweet. and you eat it, and then you taste the sweetness. So it's a direct sensory experience. Like we have 5 senses, you could call it the sensory punch and indriya. So we also have spiritual senses. It's not just like what do they say, an LSD vision or something like that. Because I didn't do those things. Or it's not like I said, I lost my mind and I'm starting to see all sorts of things that don't exist. Psychotic, something like that. But you directly experience in a spiritual way. It's not that I'm looking with my eyes and I'm seeing Krishna just like dancing. Yeah, it's not like that. But there's a spiritual aspect to our personality, which is the real aspect to our personality. And that spiritual aspect, you can have direct experience. It's hard to explain what it is. I mean, for me to explain what sweetness is, eating something sweet, it's very hard. One has to experience it. But it was and is a direct experience that you're absolutely sure that it's real. And that's what I mean by direct experience. Not explaining it further. Experiences you can't explain further. Like you said, nowadays, of course, if you're all young, you may have an experience of falling in love. I can't explain what that is either. That's funny. So, any other questions about that before I started talking about Hanuman? Because I thought it was important to explain from my perspective why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because otherwise, my question. So here's Hanuman. So let's start with Hanuman. So it's a pretty far out story that Hanuman, isn't it? That what happens, what usually happens in these different pastimes of Hanuman and Krishna and Ram, is that there's some problem in the earth mind. And there's these entities called demigods. Now, some of you may have heard about demigods like Shiva, Rama, Varuna, Vayu. And basically what they are is administrators. They are not God. I mean, just like in any government, you have a prime minister, you have cabinet members, you have parliament, so many things like that. And they are obviously not God. So Krishna, or Vishnu, or God, whatever you may call the absolute person, has all these people work for him. Because the interesting thing about someone who's God, so Krishna is God, is that he doesn't want work. He wants to play. I mean, if any of you have seen deities of Krishna, Radha and Krishna, there's Krishna with his girlfriend. You don't see the deities and demigods like that. In fact, there's an interesting story. One time, an Englishman walked into a Hindu temple. And some of the Hindu temples, they have like many, many deities. Shiva, Ganesh, all these different deities. Even they have Mahavir. And so this Englishman walked into the temple and he said, he looked at all the deities and he said, those deities are God. And the priest, who knew less than the Englishman, said, why do you believe that? And he said, because everyone else is working or meditating, and this person is there with his girlfriend, enjoying life. That's Krishna. So the point I'm making is that God is someone who's always enjoying, and he doesn't have to work. Whereas everybody else works. He's independent, he's self-sufficient, he gets what he wants without asking for it. That would be nice if you could get what you want without asking for it. Like I was just thinking of a new car. Occasionally thinking, what type of car?
Audi A3.
Sorry. Not a Maserati or
Simple.
Lamborghini or something. Anyway, so Krishna is like that. So he has all these other people who take care of all the nitty gritty, all the management stuff, which is kind of nice for him. So these are called demigods. And once in a while, there's problems on the Earth or in other planets in the universe. And they have to go to complain to Krishna or Vishnu, the same person, actually, just different names of the same person. They can complain because there's a problem in the universe. You sometimes have to go to the boss. Just like today, there's a problem with the networking. So they call the fiend who's back there trying to solve the problem. This computer. Problem with the VMs, right? Some of them went down, and it's going to be the holiday. There's not going to be enough bandwidth on the internet for poor people who want to watch Netflix, including patients.
Yeah.
So even though he normally doesn't have to get into it, he's getting into it because there's a problem. So they go to Krishna, and they say, there's a problem. Krishna says, what does Krishna say? He says, all right, I'm coming, just now coming. I'm going to come down. I'm going to come down to the Earth planet. You're live? That's good. So I'm going to come down to the Earth planet, but I want the rest of you guys to come down, and girls, to come down too, to help me with this whole thing. So basically, as far as Hanuman is concerned, he appeared when Lord Ram appeared. Now, Lord Ram appeared because the demigods were complaining about this Greek called Ravan. Probably not heard him referred to as a Greek before, but he was pretty bad because he went around kidnapping ladies all over the place. I mean, he had a lot. Of course, he got married to them, and they liked him because he was a handsome guy and rich. So they forgot about their husbands, they forgot about their fathers, they forgot about everything else when they married Robin. Because, most people, if they could marry someone who was rich and famous and powerful, they'd be extremely happy. So Robin was creating problems, also many other problems he created in the universe. And so, but the interesting thing is that Robin wasn't so bad, although I called him a Greek. He was actually a devotee who was sent down because when Krishna comes down, as Lord Ram or any of his various incarnations, he likes to fight. Just like that. All of us, we like to fight or play sports, like I know occasionally play sports. Volleyball and everything like that. So, God likes that too. So he likes to fight, and sometimes he sends his devotees down to fight with. So anyway, all the demigods are asked to come down or send their representatives or children. So here we have Lord Shiva. You've heard of Lord Shiva.
Yeah.
So Lord Shiva decides to basically have a child who will come down and help with Lord Ram's activities. And so what happens is not an ordinary circumstance of having a child. Lord Shiva and Parvati decide to have a child, and they have an embryo transplant. You heard of embryo transplants? They take the embryo out and they transplant it. And so then they call for Dr. Vayu. I'm trying to put it in humorous terms so everybody can understand. Vayu, of course, is the Buddha God. They call for Dr. Vayu to take that embryo and implant it into a monkey lady called Anjani. And she's married to Keshava. So Anjani is not just an ordinary monkey lady. She was previously in the heavenly planets with the demigods. And she got cursed to become a monkey. You know the story? You've heard me tell the story. She got cursed because she got a little too romantic with Brahaspati, the priest of the demigods. So she got cursed. She comes down to remain a monkey as long as until she gives birth. So what happens is there's this embryo transplant. Hanuman, little baby Hanuman, embryo, is transplanted I mean, it's a far out story, but that's why I had to explain why I believe in one. Because, you know, in Western perspective, this is weird. But actually, if you study science, just from another perspective, things are weird, even in science. I mean, like I said, I was, one of my fields of expertise is molecular biology, and I just asked them a question before class if they knew what a kinesin was. Probably none of you know what that is. Kinesin is a protein molecule, a combination of protein molecules in the cell that walks and transports the garbage within the cell and other things within the cell. I don't know if anyone's heard about it. That's pretty far out. You may say, why do I believe that? Because I've seen it in, I've actually seen, I've seen it in videos. Actually walks around and avoids obstacles within the cell. And it, you know, that's unbelievable. What's happening in each and every cell in the body is completely unbelievable. The complexity and the interrelations between all the mechanisms in the cell and the DNA and the RNA. I mean, another thing about the DNA, sometimes the DNA, when it's getting copied, it actually gets tangled, like your head. Sometimes your headphones or something like that get tangled with your wired headphones. And there's another entity in the cell that cuts this tangling and joins it together again. It's amazing. I mean, the material energy is so amazing that after examining and understanding material energy from a scientific perspective, you could almost believe anything. I mean, it's really unbelievable. So, the point is, yes, I do have a realization of Hanuman and Rama. So, getting down back to the point, so Keshri gives birth to Hanuman. You know, she has this embryo that's been planted from Lord Shiva and Parvati. And as soon as she gives birth, she goes back to heavenly planets, because that was the curse. She could only stay as long as that. And so immediately there's this poor little kid who's crying out, you know, he wants some food. And what happens is, as his mother's going away, he asks his mother, what am I supposed to eat? She says, you could eat something that's round and orange. And so, of course, he looks around, doesn't see too many oranges around. So he goes to the sun. The story is, there's also in a lot of the Vedic literatures, not only in the Ramayana. The stories I'm telling are from a book called the Valmiki Ramayana. Valmiki was the original author of the Ramayana. There's other Ramayanas in India, like Tulsidas Ramayana, like the Ramacharita. But the Valmiki Ramayana is written, it's the world's largest epic poem. And it's written all in the same meter. It's a beautiful poem if you can read Sanskrit. And yet it's far larger than in the West. You have the Iliad and the Odyssey, which are considered quite lengthy. So it is. So okay, getting back to the story. So Hanuman is told you should eat something red, and then he sees basically the sun, and he runs after the sun, and he's going to block the sun. And so, to make a long story short, there's other details. There's no important details. Then you have Indra, who tries to stop him. And what Indra does is he throws his weapons at Hanuman. And ultimately, he hits Hanuman in the jaw. In fact, that's what Hanuman means, jaw. Like you see sometimes a wrestler is called the jaw of muscles or something. So he hits Hanuman in the jaw, and Hanuman falls to the ground, apparently almost dead. And Hanuman's father, whose Vayu, was in charge of all the life layers and the functionings. And this is subtle layers. We're not just talking about air, winds like that, but the subtle functioning of different things even on the molecular level or the atomic level. So things get really haywire in the universe. And so the other demigods, they come down and they're having problems managing things because things are getting haywire in the universe. And so they come down to Vayu and they say, please stop this. And they bring Hanuman back to consciousness, back to life. And they all bless Hanuman like that. But Hanuman also, throughout his existence, he has this like scar or something on his jaw. So that's why he's called Hanuman. So he has great power because he is an expansion of Lord Shiva and also Vayu Putra. He's the son of Vayu. And actually, those of you who are familiar with the Mahabharata will also know that Bhimsen is Vayu Putra. He's the son of Vayu. So he's a very powerful person. Because the two itihasas or histories that are most famous in India are the itihas, they're called itihas, and the Mahabharata and the Valmiki Ramayana. So Hanuman, basically, at that point, he's so powerful, and he's just a kid, so he decides to just tease some of the sages. And he does this teasing in various ways, and they curse him. They curse him to forget about his power. So he's completely forgotten about his powers. Also, by some of the demigods, he's been given a jewel around his neck that only Krishna can see. Nobody else can see. So this is part of the divine story. So Hanuman grows up, he has all these powers and he isn't really able to execute his powers. Also, he's educated by Surya, who's in charge of the functioning of some of the planets, including the sun. And because he's educated by Surya, Surya asks him for what's called Guru Dakshina. For those of you who don't know what Guru Dakshina means, what you pay a teacher. There's a tradition in India, actually, that when you're educated in a particular school, you give a donation to the teacher. Nowadays, of course, you pay tuition or whatever here, and the teacher gets a salary. But traditionally, you would give whatever you were capable of giving. If you didn't have any money, you would just give something simple to the teacher. So everybody had an opportunity to be educated. But nowadays, of course, you need a scholarship or money. And not a monetary donation from Hanuman. He asked Hanuman to always serve his son. So it was Surya's son in the Ramayana. I don't know how to tell that story. It's a story about Hanuman. And he was living in the town of Shivok and protected. He was being protected by Hanuman. And Sugriva Vali couldn't go near Shivok because he was cursed by his sacred Ganga. If he ever went near, he would die immediately. So this was a safe place for Sugriva. So Hanuman was continually helping Sugriva. So there, just fast forward, he's there in Mount Vishimukh helping Sugriva, helping protect Sugriva. And who comes along? But Lord Ram, because Lord Ram has had his wife, Sita, kidnapped. I'm sure you won't know that story. She actually wasn't kidnapped. It was a expansion of what's called Maya Sita, who was kidnapped by Ram. And so Ram and Lakshman, his brother, they're looking for Sita Devi, trying to find out where Sita Devi, and they're advised by different sages, like say Matunga and other sages, and they go through a whole series of adventures, including meeting this nice lady Shabari, who helps direct them to Mount Krishnamukh. So anyway, so they go to Mount Krishnamukh, and Sugriva and his monkeys, they see these two men carrying weapons, and they're worried about them, and so Sugriva sends down Hanuman to try to see what's happening. So Hanuman comes down, and he's a very educated monkey. He's not actually a monkey. He's what we call in Sanskrit a Kimpurusha. Kimpurusha means, is he a human being? So he's sort of like a mix between a monkey and a human being. He has more human characteristics, but also a lot of hair all over his body. And so Hanuman comes down, but he's able to shape shift. You know what shape shifting is? He's able to change his form because he has these mystic powers. And he appears as a Brahmin. And a very educated Brahmin, because Hanuman is very educated, he's in Sanskrit. And so he's investigating to see who Ram and Lakshman are, because he doesn't know who they are. So he comes down, and one of the first things that Ram says, he said, "What is that jewel on you?" Then he realizes that's Ram, the supreme worshipful deity. So then he changes form back to Hanuman, reveals who he is, and takes Ram and Lakshman back to the top of Mount Krishnamukh, and then they make a, as you know, they make a deal, a friendship with Sugriva, and basically then Ram kills Bali. Like I said, I'm not telling the whole story, there were mines. We don't have time for that. So basically Ram kills Bali, and he makes this pact with Sugriva that Sugriva is going to help find Sita Devi, and the monkeys have actually had these jewels that Sita Devi had dropped when she was on the way to Lanka with Ravana. And so it's the rainy season. So what happens during the rainy season, they can't go anywhere because it's really rainy in India. India is terrible during the rainy season. They can't move in many cases. One time I was at Govardhan during the rainy season, and I was on the opposite. I don't know if you know where Govardhan is, part of the Vrindavan area. I was on Parikrama, and it started raining, and I had to swim back to my house there. That's really bad. So Ram just waited during the rainy season, and after the rainy season, then Sugriva. I know Lakshman got angry with Sugriva, but that's a different story. So after the rainy season, then Sugriva sent out groups of monkeys in all the different directions to try to find Sita Devi. And of course the monkeys that went to the south were like Hanuman and Dal and Neel, and also Jambavan, who's not a monkey. He's the king of the bears, he's Rikshuaj. And so they all went to the south, and they had many adventures as they were going to the south, and finally they get to the shore of the ocean. And what happens is that they're trying to figure out what they should do in terms of crossing the ocean. And there's this interesting bird, Jatayu, who informs them that Sita Devi is in this Ashok Grove, and they're trying to figure out how to cross the ocean. And finally, Jambavan, who is Chiranjiva, he's actually lived through Ram's pastimes in previous yugas before. He informs Hanuman his powers, and Hanuman flies. Hanuman expands himself, jumps off the tallest hill, the tallest mountain there, and then flies to Lanka to find Sita Devi. And on the way to Lanka, he runs into this demon. Actually, there's one demigod he runs into who tests him, and he enters into her mouth and then comes out again. And then he runs into the Singnika, who's actually a demon. And he enters into her, she's able to capture him by capturing his shadow. And he enters into her and kills her. And then he proceeds to Lanka, And in order to enter Lanka to try to find Sita Devi, he makes himself very, very small because he has this ability to shapeshift, appear in different forms. And so he's like really, really tiny. And guarding the door of Lanka is this nice lady called Lankini. And so he tries to enter and she discovers him. And she basically says, you can't come in. And there's some altercation, fight he has with her. And he punches her in the jaw. And a little tiny monkey comes in. And she reels and she reveals that she was actually cursed to become the guardian of Lanka. And after she was hurt by a monkey, she would go back to her original position. So he enters Lanka. I'm sure most of you know the story. He enters Lanka and he's flying around a little tiny monkey, little tiny monkey. And finally he enters the place where Ravana is there with all of his wives and they're all completely intoxicated. I mean, in those days they didn't smoke marijuana. It was just liquor. Nowadays, you have marijuana. You'd have Ravana smoking marijuana. Anyway, he was there. Ravana was there on this big bed, and surrounding him were all the other beds, with all the other ladies, and all the other ladies were completely intoxicated. These were ladies that had been kidnapped by Ravana. Ravana, actually, the interesting thing about Ravana, he couldn't force himself upon any lady. They had to voluntarily accept him. And as I mentioned before, the reason they voluntarily accepted him is because he was so handsome and rich. Even though they were kidnapped, they actually liked him. So, Hanuman was flying around, where is Sita Devi? Where is Sita Devi? And he's thinking, why? I'm a brahmachari. Brahmachari means a single guy. He says, I'm a brahmachari. What am I doing in this place with all these half-naked ladies? And so he thinks, I'm serving Lord Ram. So for the service of Lord Ram, I'm willing to do anything. So finally he sees Ravana himself, and he gets ready. Oops. Boy, everyone's late here. He gets ready to kill Ravana. And he's capable of killing Ravana. Not really, because Ravana has a benediction, he can't be killed. But he could be killed by a monkey. But then he remembers Ram never told him to kill Ravana. He just said, find Sita Devi. So he's very much mission focused in this way. So he's completely focused and he says, I'm not going to kill him. And he thinks, maybe the lady next to Ravana is Sita. But then he realizes it's not Sita, because Sita would never be in a position like that. And then he becomes disturbed. Where is Sita? Where is Sita? So he flies out, again, looking all over, comes in touch with Vibhishan, who is Ravana's brother. And Vibhishan is a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vibhishan, he asks Vibhishan, why is it, or how is it that you're living in Lanka? And Vibhishan answers, it's like being the tongue in between the teeth. You know, the tongue, because you can get bit pretty easily. So, then he's told that Sita Devi is in the Ashok Grove. So he flies to the Ashok Grove, and then he's in the tree, watching Sita Devi being harassed by Ravana and the Rakshasinis, who are threatening to kill Sita Devi. And eventually he's makes himself not so small, but small monkey, jumps down, makes the acquaintance of Sita Devi. And Sita Devi is finally assured, because he has some stories from Ram that assure Sita Devi that he's actually representative of Ram. And then he asks Sita Devi if she wants to jump on his back and be carried back to see Ram. And she says, no, it would not be proper for me to touch another male other than my husband. And also she says that if you were fighting the other Rakshasas, I would probably fall off. So it's not a good idea. So he says, all right, but before going back and telling Ram what's happening here, I'm going to test the Rakshasas to see how powerful they are and destroy a lot of their kingdom. So he goes and starts destroying the Ashok Grove. Tearing eating the fruit, of course, and tearing all the trees apart. And basically, Ravan keeps sending different soldiers to try to take care of him. And he kills all the soldiers, including some of Ravan's sons. In fact, this is a funny story. One time he actually passes urine in one of the kids' mouths, the son's mouths. And they said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm a monkey, what do you expect?" So eventually, Indrajit, who is Ravana's chief son, is called Indrajit, goes and conquers Indra at one particular juncture and saves Ravana. So he goes and he captures Hanuman with this rope of Brahma. And Hanuman has the benediction that even if he's captured by Lord Brahma's rope, as soon as an ordinary rope is put around him, then he can become free. So he's captured, he's brought before Ravan, and he has this ordinary rope around him at this particular juncture. And there's some discussion, as you know, whether Hanuman should be killed or he should be allowed to go because he's a messenger, and Vibhishana speaks on his behalf. And they decide not to kill Hanuman, but to set fire to his tail. Because it's described that monkeys are very fond of their tails. So they set fire to his tail, and basically what he does, he breaks free of the bonds, and he starts flying all over and sets all of Lanka on fire. It was kind of nice. And then he's worried. He said, "Oh my God, I set Lanka on fire. So does that mean the Sita's burned also?" And what happens, at the same time, Sita Devi is praying to the god of fire that Hanuman's tail will not be hurt. And Hanuman will not be hurt by the fire, which is not. And so he goes and sees Sita Devi, and then he flies back and sees the monkeys who are waiting on the shore of the ocean there, and he assures them of success. So then they all head back to Kishkinda. So on the way back to Kishkinda, there's an interesting thing that occurs. There's this honey grove, which is the personal property of the king of Kishkinda, who happens to be Sugriva at that particular point. And so the monkeys stop there to celebrate, and they all get completely drunk on honey. And there's one guard in the honey grove. His name is Dadi Mook, and they just abuse him. And so he goes running back to Sugriva to complain about what the other monkeys are doing. And Sugriva is very happy. And Sugriva says, "I'm very happy. This means they found Sita Devi." Okay, so then Hanuman reveals where Sita Devi is, and they make a plan to cross the ocean. So they all head south, and basically Hanuman, there's this whole problem of crossing the ocean, and so it's revealed by Varuna, the guy in charge of the sea, that if you build a bridge of stones and you write Ram's name on the stones, then you can go across the ocean. And it's described in the Valmiki Ramayana that the bridge was actually, so he was building bridges now. So they had someone who calculated Nal and Neel, the sons of Vishwakarma. So they were bridge builders. So they did the engineering, and then they were getting all these stones, and Hanuman was carrying these big stones. But Hanuman at one point got a little aggravated at one creature who was also helping build the bridge, and the creature was like a spider or a little insect. And Hanuman said, "Get out of my way, you little creature." And Lord Ram said, "No, he's doing as much service as you were doing. So please leave me alone." So it's not that Ram needed Hanuman. Remember that Ram is the supreme God. And he's, as I mentioned at the whole beginning of this whole discussion, he's up to Kama. He gets whatever he wants, whatever he wants it. He doesn't need anyone else. But he's doing all these things as a wonderful pastime for various reasons, because he enjoys it. Another reason is that he wants to attract us. Because if we didn't have these stories, like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and we just had philosophy, it would be pretty dry, isn't it? I mean, just think about it. The philosophy of the Gita is wonderful, but you need the Mahabharata to understand the Gita. You know, we just tell people you're not the body, you should love God, whoever he is. You know, it doesn't even make sense. Like Prabhupada, my spiritual master, would often say, to love God, you have to know God. So, we're very fortunate in our culture that we have descriptions of who the Supreme Lord is in all his various incarnations. And he's quite an interesting person. I mean, if you look at all the other spiritual paths of the world, and some of them, you know, are bona fide, but their conception of God is quite boring. Like in the Judeo-Christian religion, the conception of God is he's just a big judge. He just sits and judges you, you know, like if you've been bad, okay, you've been naughty, you've been nice. He's like I don't know if you've ever heard of Santa Claus, but he's like a bigger version of Santa Claus. You know, awards people at Christmas time, you know, you've been naughty, you've been nice. So that's kind of boring. And you say, love God, love God, love God, but you know, why should I love the person unless I can know them? So that's the reason that Krishna or Ram does all these different activities. The big reason is so that we get attracted. And when we get attracted, it's transcendental pleasure. So we forget about what we call the mundane pleasures of this world, which are temporary. You know, very temporary. I'm sure you'll experience that as you get older. The pleasures of this world are temporary. So getting back to the story, so they build this bridge, and they cross it. It's described, the bridge is quite wide. It's like several yojanas, 8 miles wide, and they build it all the way to Lanka. Incidentally, this bridge has been discovered through satellite photography. It's called Adam's Bridge right now. Through satellite photography, they discovered that there's actually a bridge between India and Lanka, and it's not a natural bridge. It's been made by someone or something, according to the scientists. So there's some corroboration there. And incidentally, in Lanka, Sri Lanka, which was previously known as Ceylon, many people worship Ravan, and they burn effigies or statues of Ram, just like we have our Ram Vijay festival, where we burn effigies of Ravan, and so they do the same thing with Ram, because Ravan is their local hero. So, anyway, so they go all the way across to Lanka, and there's so many descriptions in the Valmiki Ramayana, the fight between the monkeys and Ravan, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And, you know, Hanuman kills many of the Rakshasas, the Supreme kills many of the Rakshasas, and finally, Ram kills Ravan. Okay. And so then they all head back to Ayodhya on this Pushpaka Vimana, this airplane, which is really big. It's bigger than the 747 or 380. It's like a city. And so they all head back, and Ram takes over the kingdom, and Hanuman remains as Ram's obedient servant. And you see the deities, Hanuman is always at Ram's feet. Now there's an interesting reason why Hanuman is always depicted as covered with sindoor. This is an interesting story, that once upon a time Hanuman was seeing Sita Devi decorating herself, putting sindoor in her hair. And he asked, what is that? Why are you doing that? And Sita Devi said that when a wife does that, it makes her husband's life very auspicious. So Hanuman was thinking, you have a little hair, and a little sindoor. So I am devoted to Lord Ram too, just as much as you, Sita Devi. So he took all the cinder and smeared it all over his body. That's why you see the Hanuman deity smeared all over his body with this red cinder. And Hanuman did that, and it really displayed his love. His love was displayed in many other ways too. One other time, Sita Devi gave Hanuman some remnant jewels that she had around her neck. And what Hanuman did is he wanted to see if Lord Ram was in these jewels. He was chewing on them. And all the ministers in Lord Ram's kingdom were saying, what is this monkey, this stupid monkey? You know, he has no love for Sita and Ram. And Hanuman said, you don't think I have any love for Sita and Ram? And then it's a famous story, he tore open his chest, and in his chest, Sita and Ram. And so this is some of the stories about Hanuman. Today, of course, is Hanuman Jayanti. And in the beginning, not all of you were here in the beginning, I described to everyone why I believe in that, even though I wasn't brought up in this particular culture. You know, because we shouldn't accept things blindly just because our parents told us. I'm telling all of you, just because your parents told you about Hanuman and everything like that, it's not that you should accept it just because they told you. You have to look into it, research, have your own experience. And when you've had your own experience, then there's no doubt. And that's my particular situation. I've had my own experience, there's no doubt. So, doubt is good in the beginning. Prabhupada, our spiritual master, did not want people to be blindly following the Vedic culture and Krishna consciousness. In fact, he said blind following and absurd inquiries are condemned. And Prabhupada said doubt is a sign of intelligence. And that's why I'm here today, because I doubted. That's why I'm following Krishna consciousness, I doubted. And then when the experience was there, I accepted. So, that's it. So any questions? I think we covered a lot, right? So philosophy, yes.
Okay, so I remember, probably wasn't in a lecture recently, but you were talking about how Ram is like the ideal person, like we should try to act more like him rather than act like Krishna.
Yeah.
So why is it that we mainly, like all temples and all of those, mainly have deities of Radha Krishna rather than Sitaram?
That's actually, we mean the ISKCON temples.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, that's an interesting question. Well, and let me talk about Ram for a second. Ram is, in Sanskrit, it's called Maryada Purushottam. That means he sets the ideal example of what it means to be a perfect, ethical, moral person. And of course, you know, people do question why Ram sent Sita Devi away. I mean, that's quite heart-wrenching. And I'm not sure I agree with him for doing that. See, I don't even agree with everything God does. That's a problem, isn't it? So, firstly, I think you should have said to the washerman, get out of here. You get out of here. But anyway, so Rama set an example of being a perfect king because he's just as concerned with all the citizens of the kingdom as he is with his family and wife and everything like that. So that's considered. So he's setting that example. Whereas Krishna doesn't set such a good example in many ways. Because we know that Krishna, when he was in Vrindavan, he had some of you may have heard of rasa dance. It's not a good example. We don't advise people to have rasa dances at night with other people's wives. It's not a good idea. So, why? So the question is why? Well, there's different. First of all, I mean, let me explain. There weren't actually other people's wives. They belonged to Krishna. Everybody belongs to Krishna, first of all. Second of all, when Krishna was young, he actually had a marriage with all these girls. That's another point. Secondly, their husbands are just an illusory relationship. The husband's never even real. The husband's never even going to be able. But that's another thing. So why do we worship Krishna so much? Well, there's two modes of worship of God. God has many different aspects to his personality. As we know, God, Vishnu, Krishna, Ram, has many different avatars or expansions. You know, you've got Nrsimha, Kurma, Varaha. You know, there's a Dasha avatar, but there's actually unlimited avatars. Each one has a different mood. So Ram's mood is one of reverence. In other words, the worshippers of Ram are very reverent towards him. You don't find, it's called the mood of Aishvarya. You don't find devotees going up to Ram and slapping him on the back and say, "Hey buddy, how you doing? Ram boy." You don't find that. It's actually a reverent mood. And many people are more attracted to that mood. For example, in mostly in South India, if you go to see Balaji, that's the mood there. If you go to Sri Rangam, that's the mood there. If you go to Western India, to where Madhvacharya taught, that's the mood there. So many people are attracted to that mood, on reverent mood, right? And generally in the Western world, they worship God in that mood. Our Father who art in heaven, that's a standard expression. And God is worshipped as the order supplier, protector, everything. But there's another mood called the Madhurya mood, which is a very sweet, intimate mood. So many people, they actually want to approach Krishna or God or Ram in that mood, but you can't do that with Ram. And there were sages in Dandakaranya forest who wanted to approach Ram in that mood. And Ram said, no, Ekapatni Vrata. You only have one wife. That's it. And he stuck with Sita Devi. He never, even though Sita Devi was banished at a certain point and then entered into the earth later on when she came back, he never got married again. And so the sages in Dandakaranya who had this attraction to him in a spiritual form, they actually took birth again as gopis in Vrindavan. So it's a question of attraction. God has many different aspects to his personality. I know many devotees who are just attracted to Nrsimha Bhagavan. That's their mode of attraction. So, and I know more people who are attracted to the Madhurya or the sweet aspect of Krishna. So it's a question of different tastes. Hare Krishna. Thank you. So it's a question of different tastes. And most people are attracted to Krishna. Although, there's opening for everybody. Does that explain?
Yeah.
I think so. Because God has everything you see here originally is there in Krishna. This world, like Krishna says in the Gita, everything comes from him. So, if there's romantic affairs like in Bollywood movies, if anyone here ever watched Bollywood movies? The only one I really liked was called Oh My God. That movie? That was really nice. So, so all these things, romantic things or fighting, it must be originally in God. Otherwise, why is it here? If he didn't create it, it wasn't originally in him. Like when you look at just philosophically, when you have some emanation or something that comes from something else, it must be present in the emanator or the thing, the source of everything. Right? Like if you have $1 billion and I give you, let's say I have $1 billion, which I wish I did, and I gave you 10, then I must also have 10 plus a lot more. So Krishna is like that too. That everything Krishna has is possessed. I mean, everything we have is possessed by Krishna in unlimited degree. How's that? So there's nothing. I mean, Krishna can be very violent sometimes. And you have like incarnations of Krishna, like Parshuram, and you've heard Parshuram before. The warrior incarnation of Krishna. He goes around killing all the other warriors. Creates rivers of blood. Wow. So, you know, he's very sporty. He plays volleyball. I'm not sure about golf. I don't think we should play golf. It's too boring. That's for old people. So, that's a good question, Keshav. So, who else has a question? Yes.
Maharaj, as you say, like everything comes from Krishna, and there's some things like cheating, lust, being lust.
Yes.
So how can this negative thing, like we can say, this comes?
Because when Krishna does, it's not negative. It's nice. Can you think of an instance in the Mahabharata when Krishna cheated? No, you can't think of an instance. In the Mahabharata, there's so many instances, isn't it?
When Karna was fighting at that time, he changed to the Brahmin and then took his recovered from.
Yeah.
So it was not a cheating, but it depends on what.
It was cheating. I mean, Krishna said he wasn't going to fight. And then he interfered in the fight between Bhishma and Arjuna. And Krishna told Arjuna to fight unfairly when Karna was off the chariot. Isn't it? He said, fight. You know, Krishna's the greatest cheater. You know, but he cheats for the right purpose. Or he told Duryodhana, why are you walking around naked? Right? You know, if you're going before your mother, at least wear something around the middle of your body. So Krishna's a really interesting personality. So, but those qualities of Krishna are adorable. I mean, like we talk about Krishna stealing butter, you know, as a kid. Feeding it to monkeys. It's adorable. It's really adorable. Because it's Krishna. So, yes, everything is there, even cheating, violence, and everything like that. I mean, Krishna in the Gita says, Ritu Sarva Harashchaham. I'm death. So Krishna's killing everybody. I mean, just like if you have some big mass murderer. Or here in Australia, you don't have too many. In America, we have a lot of mass murders. Every day we hear about shooting deaths in the school. We have to, actually, we even have drills in our temples. What to do if someone comes in with a gun and starts shooting everybody. I've been trained up what to do, how to take care of the guy. Terrible, it's a terrible culture in America. So you're fortunate you're in Australia, more culture. So, but Krishna's the biggest murderer. Why? Because he's killing everybody with the time factor. Ritu Sarva Harashchaham, I am all devouring death, he says in the Gita. So, and he has a purpose. You know, that's, if we try to understand the purpose of God, that's a branch of philosophy called teleology. Then we can understand why he does what he does. But yes, there's cheating, there's stealing. But it's good when he does it. When I do, it's bad. But when Krishna does it, it's very good. Good question. So, what's another question?
I had a follow-up question for this.
Yeah.
So as you told that Krishna is kind of a mass murderer, which he tries to kill, but it came as a karma again when Gandhari cursed him that just like my family died, your family also died. So is God bigger or karma bigger? So that is one.
No, God doesn't have karma. But he wanted his family, he'd use that curse as an excuse to get rid of his family. The reason he wanted to get rid of his family because they had accomplished the mission that they came down to the earth for. Just like if you have an army go somewhere after they defeated the enemy, you want to take them back to their original base. You don't want them to hang it around because they'll create a lot of problems for the people. So that's explained in the Bhagavad, that Krishna is feeling that he relieved the burden of the earth, but his family members are going to become a bigger burden unless they leave. So he uses that curse of Gandhari as an excuse to have his family members fight with each other. You know, they all got drunk and they fought with each other and killed each other off. It's an interesting story in the Bhagavatam, and also in the Mahabharata. The stories also in the Mahabharata. Good question. Educated questions. Who else has a question?
Just to sum up what you said, you saying that Krishna has infinite personalities?
Krishna has what?
Infinite personalities.
Infinite personality. Yeah, Krishna has an infinite aspect. So some people think because Krishna has an infinite personality, he must have no personality because anything that's great or big cannot be confined to a personality. That's a standing question people ask. That how can you say God has a personality? Because he's unlimited. Anything that's absolutely big and great, personality is a limitation. Well, according to the philosophy of the Vedas, that God has an unlimited aspect, and also a localized aspect. Because to be unlimited, like if you were to say that God cannot have a personality, that's limited. But if you say that God can have a personality, but he cannot have a bigger aspect, that's also limited. So we say that God has both aspects. If you look at the absolute truth, a little philosophical, that Krishna has three aspects. One is called Brahman, which is the all-pervading, impersonal energy. Then apart from that is what we call Paramatma, which is the localized expansion of God in the heart. And then there's Bhagawan, which is personality. So, so God is impersonal and personal simultaneously. Because if you take one of them away, he's not the greatest anymore. Does that make sense? He has to have both aspects. That's actually a really important point. Thank you for asking that. So, any other questions? How long do we have here?
I think we're like 4 minutes over time already.
Oh, 4 minutes over time, because we have somewhere else.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much. And as you can see, we have quite a philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And we, any of you are interested in examining some of our books of philosophies or practicing. Like I said, proof of the pudding is in the tasting. So the proof of Krishna consciousness is doing it. Philosophically, it's nice, but you got to really do it to experience it. Okay? Thank you very much. All glories to Prabhupada.
Ciao.